please join me in welcoming Fine Art Connoisseur Editor-in-Chief Peter Trippi and collectors Jill DeTemple and Gordon O'Brien to the Evenings with Hulings Virtual Salon. It's a program of the Clark Hulings Foundation. CHF is a nonprofit that promotes the legacy of painter Clark Hulings by equipping working visual artists to be self-sustaining entrepreneurs. And I want to have a special welcome to Fine Art Connoisseur readers and Oil Painters of America members who are joining us today. Thank you to Shirley Holland for her support of the Salon series up to this point. We're looking for further support so we can continue the series. If you like what you hear today, please consider a gift. I will put it in the chat, clarkhulingsfoundation.org/give. Now, a little housekeeping, please add your questions to the chat. We'll open up a Q&A at the end in about an hour, about 8 o'clock. Please make sure your mics are muted when you're not speaking. And now I'd like to turn the evening over to Peter Trippi.
Thank you, Penelope. Great to see you and Elizabeth Hulings. It is a pleasure to be back with you virtually. I wish we could be together in one room, but actually, if there's any benefit to this dreadful pandemic, it's been that we've had so many great conversations during this period via Zoom all across the world. And this is just another example. I'd like to extend my thanks as well to Shirley Holland for underwriting this series of salons, because I think it's just so important that we keep in touch. Although it's becoming easier and easier now, thank goodness, to travel to places to be together, it's still not quite as easy as it once was. So this is a treat. I'm really pleased to see Jill and Gordon again. I saw you roughly a year ago on one of these salons. We were chatting with Libby Whipple, the collector in Indiana, and you were observing that. So you know a bit about how this format works. Thank you for your good cheer as we've been putting this program together. It's been a pleasure emailing and phoning with you over the last few months. Every program, even if it's only an hour and 15 minutes, takes a lot of time to organize. So we're grateful to Gordon and Jill for being such good sports. One of the great things that they helped us with was putting together the slide presentation that I'm about to show you. We've organized 16 images of works of art in the collection of Jill DeTemple and Gordon O'Brien, who live, by the way, in Virginia, and who have developed together a very successful real estate investment business. They are business people who have succeeded and applied a lot of their business acumen to art, but always with an eye on pleasure and joy. It's interesting to learn more about how they've approached this journey. I learned for the first time about them through preparing an article about their collection in the spring 2021 issue of Fine Art Connoisseur. The magazine, as you may know, I'm holding up the latest copy here with a big buffalo on the cover. The magazine is devoted to collectors primarily of contemporary realist art, although also historical art, and certainly Jill and Gordon qualify in both directions, and we'll hear more about that tonight. That this has been a collection that is growing since, 2010, or maybe even earlier. We'll hear a bit about that journey that they've been on. Let's just jump right into the slides, if I may. We're going to show 8 works by living artists. I'm not going to comment on them. I specifically asked Jill and Gordon to hold back as well, much as they would love to tell us some details about why they own these things. It's always like a beloved child, each work of art, but we will come to some of them later in the conversation. Just showing you here one marvelous work by C.W. Mundy, Christopher Blossom. You can see these are really diverse in their subject matter. They also were diverse in size. I can assure you I didn't want to bother you with the captions of dimensions and so on, but rest assured they are wide-ranging. Artists from all across the United States. Really great examples in each genre: landscape, still life, figures, historical, mythical, daily life. Now, we jump to historical. That is something that some of you may not have expected. It's a newer interest for Jill and Gordon, and we'll hear about how that came to be. I'm just showing you in chronological order, historical order, that is, these marvelous things. Some of the names are very familiar, others are less familiar to us, but it's all about the quality, clearly. European and American, as you can see. And we finish with a marvelous Andrew Wyeth, really spectacular. So, okay, I'm going to stop sharing this particular screen. Now I can see more friendly faces. That's great. Okay. Hi. Gordon and Jill, thank you again for helping with the slide deck. I think maybe let's just jump right into it and talk a bit about your evolution, one might say, as collectors. First of all, were you interested in art as children, or did you become interested at a later point in life?
I did a little bit of drawing and painting as a child, but never really studied.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, nothing for me, it's sort of embarrassing to say I lived in Chicago for 15 years and I never went to the Art Institute because I couldn't give a damn about it. And so now today we would actually fly to Chicago to see the Art Institute, but it's again, my wife has taught me a lot, and that's one of the things to appreciate art. So she gets the credit.
I love it. So tell me about your first art purchase. When did that happen? How did that come about?
I mean, I had a couple little things before we got married, but I think our first thing was our first Christmas. Gordon, there was an artist that I liked, which is very different from the kind of art we collect now, pretty bold and modern. And
an Iranian artist, right?
Yes, and I think the best we could do at the time was it was a big piece, but it was a Giclée.
Giclée, yeah, that's all we could afford at that stage, so that's what we bought.
And we still have them.
Yeah,
sure.
But not on the wall.
They are in a little bit more of a corner right now, but I think that was probably it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And this idea then of one's eye changing over time is very interesting to me. But I think a lot of people are anxious about art collecting because they feel that there is one answer, and that if you don't know that answer already, you should just stay away, setting aside the whole issue of, is it authentic? Because of course with contemporary art, it may not need to be authentic because the artist is there in front of you, selling it to you with the dealer standing by. So, it's not even about that always. It's about a bunch of other things that have to do with confidence and just feeling like you know what you're about. Tell me about how your tastes have changed over time, and maybe you could walk me through this interest in contemporary and then historical, especially 19th century, but not exclusively. I'd love to know, when was that aha moment? I think it might have been in relation to Plein Easton, the wonderful painting festival on the Eastern Shore of Maryland, but I don't want to lead the question. Tell me about that moment.
Yeah, why don't you start with that, Helen?
Well, I mean, I think we really started collecting at Plein Easton.
Mm-hmm.
And, we happened to have a cottage over there on the Eastern Shore, and I was there in the summers with our then toddlers. They're now teenagers. And we discovered, just kind of literally happened upon Plein Easton. And, I told Gordon when he was getting there that weekend, we're going to this thing Friday night, which has become a thing for us now for about 15, 16 years.
It's so great.
The hottest Friday night in July is the collector's party at Plein Easton. And, we got lucky because we've learned over time that Plein Easton is held in very high regard. And so we were pretty lucky to start our collection at, a well-curated, well-juried event.
Yes.
With lots of talented artists. And so that's where we started our collection. And we started out buying good paintings and also paintings of scenes that we loved from our beloved Eastern Shore. And, funny enough, then kind of fast forward maybe 10 years, we started, I think our collection of historical artists really started with, funny enough, French plein air art. So it's kind of funny how we just went back a couple hundred years and started collecting kind of similar things.
Right.
And over time, talking about how our change, you can talk a little bit about that, Gordon.
Yeah, I would say, as you do more research and look at pieces, you want to educate yourself, right, and understand what you're buying. And so, you run across the auction houses, and I will tell you the first couple of auctions were very intimidating for us, right? Because we didn't know what the hell we were doing, and we come to find out that the auctioneer took advantage of us. Now today we're smarter than that, but they have all these little tricks they play to drive pricing and stuff like that.
And it was honest and allowed. We just didn't understand. We didn't understand.
We didn't. There's nothing untoward happening. It was all within their rules of fair play, right?
Yes.
Let's just put it that way. And but it became interesting for us, and I think Jill is much more methodical and disciplined than I am. So we have two different journeys underway here, right? So we will probably agree on 70% of the stuff, but there is 30% that she will like, and I don't hate it, but I wouldn't buy it. But if she likes it, that's great. And the stuff I like ends up in the basement because she doesn't want to look at it the whole time, right? So that's how that compromise works. But I think, and I've spoken to some artists, and, especially CW, who's been a really great mentor for us and taught us so much, that for me personally, and then Jill can speak to it, as I started to appreciate it, I've become less precise and more abstract in what I appreciate in photography. At first, if I didn't see something that was really quite realistic, I was like, yeah, I wouldn't like it. But today, I have an appreciation of what that means and the message it's communicating. And it's almost what the painting suggests rather than, what it shows. And, and so I found that I've liked a lot of interesting stuff that perhaps, Jill, you don't love.
I think we both appreciate most of everything we have, but we both have our favorites.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, that's only natural, of course. Now, I'm interested in this idea that, there you were seeing some of the best plein air painters in the world, not just in America, in Easton. They're still going all these years later. And you got to know them. We'll talk a bit about your relationships with artists a little later. But, clearly they were telling you a bit about their techniques, and you were watching them at work, and you were chatting about their, lifestyles and practices and so on. And then you mentioned that the first historical art you began to acquire was also outdoor painting, primarily French. That's interesting to me. Was that a place of comfort for you, that you already knew a fair amount about that genre, and so you could kind of swim in that pool comfortably?
Yeah, perhaps. You showed the Friseke we bought, Peter, earlier, and that was one of our very first pieces we bought at auction, perhaps the very first one.
Yeah.
And again, it's a beach scene, it's done outdoors, we could connect with it because it's not, different era, but similar scene, right?
Sure.
And so maybe within our own brain that resonated, right? Because it was not hard for us to extrapolate where we'd come from.
Yeah.
But then that begins the journey, and you do research about, I didn't know who the artist was at first, and then we do research and we come to understand what he did at that stage, and then you look at all his contemporaries, and it'll eventually reach, if you like Impressionism, which we do, it's always going to take you back to France, right? And so,
well, that's where it started. Absolutely. That was the beginning. So I'm curious, just looking behind you at these wonderful paintings framed in beautiful gilt frames. Tell me about your display techniques regarding, for example, framing, lighting, security or climate control. And I'm also interested in how you mix things up or don't when it comes to genres or periods around the house, or maybe both houses, both Virginia and Maryland. Can you give me some informal insights on that?
Well, some people go to brunch on Saturday morning. We make our coffee and in our slippers go around the house and rearrange the art. So it's just, and Gordon usually starts it and then it becomes a thing.
And then Jill is cursing me 2 hours later.
Okay, time to get out of our service. So we do a lot of that, and we have like, if we're not too informal here, we have this system. Oh yes, the way the light is.
Oh,
You
good.
see those little wires?
We sure do. Yes.
So we have a metal rail system built into our crown molding system because we've recently renovated. So we actually
Good.
planned it. But this metal rail system will bump right up against a ceiling or an existing crown molding system, which is the way we did it in our other house in Maryland.
Right.
And then the wires are very easily have connectors, and they're very easily adjusted. So, I mean, we could rearrange, and then we also have lighting too,
Right.
that can
Yes.
be focused on different switches and dimmers and that sort of thing. And we have some tracks too in other places where we do more of gallery type style
Yep.
hanging,
Right.
or salon style. So that would be just one thing I would say has really changed our lives in terms of not having to worry about holes in the walls and being able to rotate. And then Gordon, he has fun with coming up with little themes. So, I could show you our front hall right now is a still life floral theme, and
There we go.
it has everything from really, really old, like 1600 Dutch artist kind of florals to Michael Klein, C.W. Mundy,
Right.
some other deceased. So going up the stairs right now, we have kind of a theme of floral still lifes, for example.
Great.
We'll do some boats sometimes.
And I think what I like to do, Peter, and I think Jill, the UPS driver is here.
Oh my
If you-
goodness.
If
Okay.
you leave a piece of art stationary, I think your brain just ignores it after a while.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so we like to refresh it so that it becomes noticeable, and we come to reappreciate it, because if you look at it in the same spot, you really don't recognize or see it.
That's a great point, Gordon. I like that very much. I think that people sometimes get settled and it's all lovely, but actually they stop seeing. So that's really helpful to hear. Of course,
Yeah.
the system that you've installed in the house during the renovation helps with that flexibility. Some
Correct, yeah.
people are driving nails into walls, and that can be a nuisance. Thank you for conveying that. That's really cool.
I will say that had you told us 5 years ago that we'd have a bunch of these gold frames, we'd be like, oh, there's no way in hell we would ever do that. But over time, we've come to, I don't know if it's appreciated or we've just gotten used to it, but that's pretty much the standard. And I think during the course of this journey, you'll get involved with framers and conservators and people who will help you spend your money, basically. They've always got good reasons to make up why their services are required. But we've come to now, very much appreciate a frame, and what a frame adds to it. And as I think we all know, a frame can change a painting. Right?
Totally.
A bad frame can ruin a painting, and then a good frame can really make it pop.
As can lighting.
As can lighting.
I
Yes.
think lighting is even maybe more important.
Right.
than the frame.
Yeah.
So today we're quite conscious of the frames and how it sets up. And now when I go to a museum, I'm not only looking at the art, I look at how they curate the art and how they group it and how they position it, because you can learn a lot from the experts, right? So that's what we're hoping to do.
Well, that's great advice about museums and watching how they do it. Now, was there any individual who was especially helpful in pointing you toward good framing? Because that, as you say, is a terribly important decision. When you were going to Plein Easton, for example, was there someone who, made a point of saying, oh, look how well that's framed, that makes it better, or in an auction house?
No.
I mean, artists we know have helped us. Elaine has often.
Yes, they can help
Right.
us. And Jill and I were just talking about it,
Tell him what you said. Yeah.
I was like, should we talk about the frames? Because it really, I shouldn't say it. It's annoying when there's a beautiful piece of art and it's in a crap cheap frame. Honestly, it's
Absolutely.
Just. Now, Jill said, well, have we ever not bought a piece because of the frame? And the answer is no, because we know we're going to reframe it.
Right.
So, maybe from an artist's perspective, but I do think that, when you are selling a piece of art and you're representing yourself and your product and your brand equity, at least my advice would be put it in a nice frame. And frankly, that's something, again, not to single out any particular artist, but CW does a fantastic job. His frames are excellent.
Yes.
They're high quality. And he too has a very good, he's taught us of the value of a good frame on a piece
Yes.
of art. Frankly,
Well,
some of his pieces we buy just because of the frame. It's not.
Never mind the art.
Never mind the art.
And I mean, I guess I should say too, that we try to, when we acquire a piece of historical art, a lot of times our conservator will take a look at it and our framer will come in and take a look
Good.
at it. And will help us understand if it is most likely the original frame
Yep.
or a historically appropriate frame. And so we do try, that's part of the reason we've ended up with frames. Our tastes tend to be a little more clean
Yes.
than some of the framing that we have on the historic pieces, but we try to stay within the period and keep them in historically appropriate frames.
Good. No, that's very important. So let's talk about acquiring. Obviously, with Plein Easton, you were in a, if you will, controlled setting of high quality. The artists were there. Everything had been juried or vetted in some way. Even if it was made fresh, the artist himself or herself had already been given the stamp of approval by someone. Now, over those subsequent years, you've gone to galleries, to auctions, to, I don't want to put words in your mouth, maybe to art fairs. Can you tell me about all of that? And also let's talk about online and its various iterations. Where has this been going for you in the last 10 years?
I think our evolution is we've started to buy a lot of stuff at auction.
Mm-hmm.
Because, from my very simple way of doing it, I need to understand the market value because we're not talking small sums anymore, right? This is, at least for us, real money, right? So there are significant prices. And it gives me comfort to know that I was only a little dumber than the individual before me to end up with that piece, right? So there's a market value and the premiums are well disclosed. So it's a very transparent market. So that gives me comfort that we are generally in the vicinity when we are spending significant amounts of money in that space. As you know, within the gallery universe, that's not that transparent at all, right? So it's not obvious.
Right.
But I will say that now, as we've gone through this a little while, and it's very easy for anybody to look at a piece that we bought at auction to go onto any database and figure out what we paid for it. That's probably not as exciting as, and today I think we have a better sense of what a particular artist's value is. And so we're comfortable having a discussion on a private one-off basis, because we have a sense, right? It's not like, we have no clue on what a piece of art's worth. So that, and just so we're debating is, there's this whole selling feature that they tried, the gallery owners tried selling it fresh to market, right?
Yeah.
That just means they're charging you more than they should, right? From my perspective. But it's the whole sort of positioning and do we put value on that? We haven't gone there yet, Peter, but I'm becoming to appreciate that more because if you want something unique, there's definitely, that's interesting. But with that said, one of the great thrills Jill and I we will go to New York, and I never knew this was possible, and I'm sure everybody else does, but you can go to Christie's and you can see some of the world's best art for free.
It's amazing.
You do a preview, and you will see something you may never see again in your life, but it's just unbelievable stuff that we could never afford, but just really appreciate. We've seen wonderful hoppers and, just spectacular pieces that for us is fun. It's a thrill.
I mean, it's really a thrill. I mean, it is. It's almost like getting invited into 20 private homes and seeing their art collections, because these paintings may come from one private collection, be on display for 2 weeks, and then go into another private collection for another how many years, or God forbid, a vault somewhere. And so it's pretty amazing to get to see those works. And sometimes we do try for them and they get away, and I'm always wondering where they landed.
I'm afraid they can't tell us.
Yeah, exactly. I know
It's
every
frustrating.
once in a while it'll finally become public and they'll be
Right.
like, yeah, it landed there. But I'm always trying to, there's a couple that got away that I keep wondering where they landed.
Well, it's so great that you do make the trip to New York, which is doable, of course, for you so that you can see them in person. But let's talk about online. I mean, certainly during the pandemic, a lot of people began buying art for various reasons. They were at home, they were looking at their walls more often. They were thinking, oh, I want to upgrade here. I've got a little extra cash because I'm not taking a holiday to Europe. And also, the websites got better. Let's face it, galleries, auctioneers, everybody stepped it up so that they could make the art much more visible, better photographed, more angles for sculpture, etc. Did that happen with you, or did you kind of keep on the same, pace that you were at before?
No, we were buying online before the pandemic, Peter, and maybe this sort of speaks to our lack of knowledge, but the free art that you showed early on,
Yep,
we bought
sure.
we bought that sight unseen. We saw the image, we liked
Wow.
it, we researched it.
Because it was in a French auction.
It was in
Right.
Paris, right? So we
Yes.
couldn't go to New York.
Sure.
And there was a little bit, they way underpriced it, right? So at first, we were like, yeah, for that amount of money, we can risk it, right? If it sucks.
And we bought it from a very reputable
Yes, we
auction
bought it
house,
from Blue Chip
and
Auction.
Sure.
had
Yes.
the images
And all-
reviewed by our conservator. I mean, we
We
did
did a
some
lot of
we did
research,
homework.
right?
We-
Right, but we had not seen the piece in person, and we ended
Sure.
up paying a very significant sum of money. But today, without regret, we feel it's one of our finest pieces. We feel that he's a tremendously underrated artist who hopefully over time will become more appreciated, and no regrets on that. But to that point, I think though, I made this comment before, Peter, is that the art market is really evolving, and the power of social media is not to be underestimated.
True.
We have discovered artists that I've seen on Instagram. We've bought art from an artist on Instagram from Turkey, from London, from all over the place,
Ukraine.
the Ukraine, and again, we're not spending significant dollars here, right? They're within our risk of, yeah, we screwed up and Jill's not, throwing me out of the house because we made that purchase. But, we were quite, you can really develop a strong relationship with somebody over the internet and social media. There's a tremendous artist that, CW introduced us to, a guy called Denis Gorichny out of the Ukraine, who's really a tremendous talent. And, I think everybody should own a piece because one, he's very reasonable today, but I've never spoken to him on the phone even. It's all on social media.
Yep.
And I believe we have some very fine pieces of it.
Great. I'm intrigued. Actually, I'd love to know more. So thinking about investment and value, because you've touched on that a few times, certain works of art are by artists who are relatively unknown and may not grow in value in your lifetime or even your children's lifetime. Others, like Andrew Wyeth, absolutely. I mean, it's worth a great deal when you bought it, and it will be worth more later. That's just a fact. Is that in the mix of factors that you consider with every purchase, or is that just running parallel and incidental?
I would say when you buy a Wyeth, you're not only buying the image, you're buying the brand, right? I think anybody, because there's no way to justify the price in my mind without the brand value, right? And so I think you need to be cognizant of that. Would we ever buy a well-known artist that didn't have a great quality image? I hope not. Maybe in the early days, I was susceptible to that. Like, wow, I can get a Lhermitte for like, a little bit of money.
Right.
Today, we wouldn't do that. And I think I've come to understand that you really want to buy quality, right?
Yeah, we'd still buy a Lhermitte, but we want to make sure that, we're not just going for the cheap Lhermitte, right? We want to make sure that it's
exactly.
If we're getting a great price, wonderful, but we want to make sure that it's high quality and a good representation of his finest work, and all of that. And Lhermitte
Well,
is
and
one of the ones that we started collecting, which was a French plein air artist.
right, perfect example. Yes,
one of our early
Hmm.
auction pieces was a Lhermitte.
right. And I think that's a really wonderful point, of course, that it's true in the past and today that not every work by every artist is going to be his or her best, that there are good days and bad days. And you have to honor that. It doesn't mean that they're fake or unfinished or whatever. It's just not as great as that one over there. And so your eye has been growing in sophistication over time because you look more. And if you go to museums, you have that great benefit of seeing very, very, very good things as well. Not just what's on the market, but things already acquired.
Yeah, and and we really try to learn from, the experts in my mind. As you know, I check in with CW a lot. I don't know if Tim Newton's on the line on the Zoom or not, but Tim has got a phenomenal eye. He's got a phenomenal collection, and we will often ping Tim and say, hey, what do you think? And he's like, no, you're being swayed by the brand, right? And I very
Right.
much appreciate that honest feedback.
Good,
And
good.
you should have.
Thank you very much.
Oh, Tim,
Oh, there's Tim.
you should have Tim's collection online. I mean, I wanted to say it is one of the best we've seen.
Well,
He's
we've
phenomenal.
done a big feature article on Tim Newton's collection in
Okay.
Fine Art Connoisseur, but it's been many years. We probably should do another because it gets better all the time.
Yeah.
It's true what you say about Tim being such a great influencer, as the kids
Yes.
call him.
Yeah.
That's exciting. And indeed, talking to artists too is always very helpful because they have insights on all sorts of technical and aesthetic issues. Let's talk a bit about something you said once last year when we were preparing the article, that you're hoping to see more opportunities to bring collectors together to see each other's treasures and exchange ideas and information. What might a group or society or organization of collectors have to teach each other, and how might that happen in your community or nationally? Do you know of examples that are up and running that are really laudable? I would just love to think on that because we try to do that in the magazine, but obviously we are paper. We're not in the room together looking at art.
Well, I mean, I think, yes, there are lots of things we can learn from each other, even simple things like how we display our art, how we light our art. It's a lot easier to find the regional framer as opposed to traveling and that sort of thing. So lots of those kinds of things I think would be helpful. But I think aside from the heady kind of things, it would just be fun.
Yes.
I mean, our
Yes.
teenagers love art, but there's a little bit of an eye roll at how we can sit around and go through multiple bottles of wine and hours of time just talking with other art people about everything involved with art. So, I mean, I think one of the best parts of art collecting over the years for me has been the journey and the relationships and the adventures and all the people we've met along the way and the ones we've gotten, the ones that we've lost, and of course now we get to live with the art and we have all those memories to go along with it. But the relationships are a huge part of what makes it fun for us.
Absolutely.
I do think there'd be, I would love to have a, group of, maybe 5 or 20 different people around the area where we live and go to their house and see their collection, right? Because 1, I want to see nice art. 2, by definition, you have something in common, right? So you have you have some similarities, and learn from them as to their journey, what they see and how they view art, right? And see if you have a connection and similarity. I mean, when people come over, a lot of people will just walk by our collection and never even notice it.
Yeah.
But for the people who do see it, it's really fun because they're interested and it's a way of connecting with them and having discussions. And we've got, we've established relationships with people on the local museum scene here and all of that who are interested to see what we want, and they want us to make some donations, which isn't going to happen, but
they can only hope. But you put your finger on something interesting. Of course, museum groups do exist, not in every community, not in every museum. I certainly ran a few at Baltimore and Brooklyn in the museums there, where we would gather those kindred spirits and they would visit each other's homes as well as visiting other sites like artist studios and other museums. It is a pleasure, and you eventually become so friendly and comfortable with each other that the door opens to the home, which is not something that one would normally do with a stranger. And I totally hope for that everywhere, because I think you're right. It is just fun, and you're always going to learn something as it happens. Now, I would like to say that beyond the museum, certainly there are some venues where people can gather and talk about art. The Salmagundi Club in New York being one example, where people who are interested in our kind of, let's call it realism, are able to look. Also, the Oil Painters of America, with which Jill is very involved. We want to hear about that. I also wonder whether the Clark Hulings Foundation and its programming can be tweaked to do more of that community building. Even if there aren't in-person events, can there be more virtual ones, or possibly both? I mean, sometimes maybe there's a need for a seminar or a conference of some sort that focuses not only on Clark's art, but also on art of its kind, to do with realism or art of the American experience. I'm just throwing all of that at you because they're all different platforms, but they're all potentially supportive of each other.
Yeah, I think that's right, Peter. And, for example, if either the OPA or Clark Hulings wanted to, clearly these virtual presentations are very helpful and interesting, right? That's why we signed up for the first one, to learn about other people. I would really love to, again, if through their respective databases, it doesn't have to be a lot, 2-3 other collectors within the general vicinity.
Yeah,
I would love to see other people's collections, and we would love to, assuming they're decent people, which generally you find they are, over to the house and, develop friendships and relationships, because as Jill said, at the end of the day, it's, you can't develop relationships with dead people, but, some of our closest friendships today are with our artist friends. It started off as a,
yes,
hey, we like your art, but what's even more interesting is when you like the people, right? And then they matter to you and you become friends. And that's really the critical element. I mean, we know CW because of Tim Newton, and we know Tim Newton because of Plein, and those relationships connect, and you form for us meaningful connections with people.
yes, that's very well put. And I think that, I am actually sad not to be at Plein Air Easton this weekend, because I have enjoyed chatting with people that I've admired from afar, but not actually been in the room with until that moment. So there's another example of an event where kindred spirits come together and then keep in touch later. So all of these are active, and there's no single recipe that works and the others don't. It's just a matter of good management and the right people in the mix, without being snobby. It's really not about that wheeling and dealing side of the art world. It's much more about ideas and aesthetics.
100%, right? Because there are so many very talented artists that we know nothing about,
Yep.
And I will tell you, 10 years ago, I didn't know who Andrew Wyeth was, and today I know about his dad and his son and the whole bit. But you do that because you run into people and, you learn from them. For us, the education and the knowledge that you benefit from, super smart, experienced people is what I enjoy very much.
Yes.
I realize that, we know very little, and there are people who know a lot more, like yourself, Peter. I mean, getting to know you has been, really enjoyable, because your in expertise and knowledge is just so tremendous. I'd love to capture you for like a day and just not let you go, and just, just see what all ideas you had in your head, because it's so interesting and so fun.
We'll do it. Well, and I've enjoyed meeting you and getting to know you. The amazing thing is we've never shaken hands. It's just so funny. This is so pandemic. It's so crazy, but it's working. I would point out that I have actually attended a Clark Hulings Foundation event where people were in the room in a wonderful private home in Colorado. So it does happen. And I think that is definitely something we're all hoping for, again, as things become more, if you will, normal, and events start to happen and conferences are organized and so on. I think that is exciting. There's also a group called Collectors for Connoisseurship run by Shannon Robinson, which is in the same zone. So that's something to look into as well, C4C. They're having an
Okay.
event in October in Long Island
Oh,
this year.
thank you. We'll look into that. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, C4C. I also, I wonder about Oil Painters of America. Maybe Jill could bring us up to date. You serve on the board of that wonderful organization, which has been around many years. Tell us about how it's doing and why you're interested.
Yeah, that Oil Painters America is a pretty amazing organization that the mission of the organization is to preserve and protect representational art. And it's traditionally been an organization of artists and has expanded, it's a membership organization and has expanded its membership to collectors and art lovers now too, and has a collector circle. And so we've had a couple of these type of virtual events to for collectors, and the artists participate too, because art lovers love art, and
Absolutely.
and a lot of artists are collectors and collectors are artists, and so
Yes.
so we found that there are lots of programs and that sort of thing that both groups would be very interested in. So I think I saw that Penelope put something in there, a link to Oil Painters of America. I think we have several of our members who have joined in this evening. So please, if you're interested, go look at Oil Painters of America, see there's some very interesting programming there, and join our collectors circle.
That's great. That's really helpful.
Yeah.
I must admit, I was not so up to date on the collector circle. I'm going to take a close look and learn more. I've always admired OPA and attended events to see terrific art. But it's good to know that that side of the organization is evolving. Good.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. And that's
Great.
another great way where we have found, really, really fine art is by attending live and then through COVID virtually the national show for the Oil Painters of America. We've done it both ways, live and virtually, to see some amazing art, acquire some amazing art. We also have acquired art both virtually and live at American Impressionist Society National Show.
Good.
Through American Masters, which is a show that Tim Newton curated for a number of years at Mundy.
Yeah.
So those are other ways to, they're tightly juried, tightly curated shows.
Yes.
So, you're fishing in the right spot to get some really, really high quality art. And then, and then for me, the test is, it's got to give you the warm fuzzies. So there's got to be an emotional pull as well.
And I'll add to the list California Art Club. They do great work. Their gold medal show is about to open next week in California, obviously. And also they have a collector's circle run by their leadership team, Elaine Adams and Peter Adams. So that's another thing to check out. Yeah, they do in-person events in California, but they also have had quite a lot of virtual programming and will continue it because it's worked so well. So that's a really strong partner in our field. Now, let me jump to some advice that I would love for you to maybe relay to our artist viewers and others. Really, every artist is running a small business. What traits and practices have you observed in successful artists that might make them so successful? If you were an artist trying to get Gordon and Jill to buy your art, what would you do?
Well, I mean, we talked about it a little bit earlier. I think in this day and age, and especially during COVID times, having a really strong online presence, it's hard not to do that. I don't think artists getting started, it is helpful to be in reputable galleries. I think Gordon and I have not bought most of our art through galleries. It just hasn't worked out that way, but I think they can be important in, a beginning artist's career. And there are certain galleries, especially if they get picked up with certain galleries that have a prestigious reputation and a strong collector base. I think that can be helpful. As we said before, when you display your art, please frame it well, please light it well, that sort of thing. Absolutely. Most of the artists use high quality materials, but that's also an important thing.
Very true. Let me go ahead. Please go ahead, Gordon. I have another question related to that, but keep going.
I think establishing the personal collection, right? So, I just met Bill 2 months ago, right, Jill?
Mm-hmm.
And now we are much more likely to buy a piece of Bill's because I know him, I like him. And what I did is I wasn't familiar with Bill's work. So I came home and I Googled it and I'm like, wow, this guy can actually paint, And so I was like, okay, so the next time we run across a piece now, it resonates. There's a connection, right? It's not just, pigment on canvas.
Exactly.
It's a person, it's Bill. I like Bill, I like his wife, so there's as a collector, there's ever more reason to, make that purchase rather than it being a distant thing, because it becomes more than just the physical thing.
Right.
And I think keeping in touch with us, now that we've been doing this for years, we've seen young artists be now 15 years into their careers. I mean, that's a long period of time for us. And there are specific artists that we've really enjoyed seeing their work mature and seeing them as artists mature and knowing them over that time. So I think even, staying in touch with your collectors and again, being out there in social media because it's a way to stay in touch, but, emails or, I love to get the note with, we thought you might be interested in this piece because you like XYZ kind of art. I mean, there are many artists that we have just really felt kind of part of their journey. We bought some of their early art. And so, it's like not children, but a little bit, we feel very vested in their success and love to see them grow and support that.
What about commissions? If someone thinks, oh, I love this artist and his or her aesthetic, but I haven't seen a specific work in a gallery that is what I want. I mean, do you pick up the phone and talk to that artist, or have you pursued any of those channels or know people who have?
We've definitely done that. We don't do a lot of that. And I think it's turned out that we've been pretty happy with what we've done. But I think
I've been kind. They suck. Commissions suck from my perspective. Oh, she's pinching. She's pinching.
I told you I was going to pinch it.
Okay, so for me, the issue is there's a disconnect when you provide the direction for the commission and what the artist's interpretation is.
Yeah.
And so I've generally been disappointed with commissions because yes, it's a good piece of art, but it's not what I had in mind. Now, with that said, I will share with you the Michael Klein that we showed you, Peter, on us. So we've come to know Michael and his wife quite well. And, I think Michael is perhaps he's definitely one of the best, perhaps even the best floral still life artists out there, right?
He's great.
And so they don't call him Mr. Latour.
For nothing, yeah. And so, so what we've done is we've sent Michael, we said, hey, here's some flowers from our garden. Do you mind painting us a piece? And he's been kind enough to do it. And they've turned out really well. So in some ways, is that a commission? Yeah, it's a commission. But,
that's
so
an example.
I don't know.
That's a great one. Absolutely. I mean, that is not so much about imagining a scene, because of course the flowers are what they are. Right. And there we are. I mean, he looks with his own unique eye and it turns into magic. So great. Yeah, that's helpful. Now, a question that's corollary to this idea of running a small business. Has there been a moment where an artist's decisions about anything have prevented a purchase? They're unorganized, they're running late, or the dealer has really messed it up, like gotten the price wrong or jumped the price. It doesn't have to be the artist individual. It could be someone in the mix of the art ecosystem, something that got away.
Yeah, I mean, generally artists are not good business people. So let's start with that.
It's kind of like the entrepreneurial anything, right? Especially you do your craft and then the business part of it is an aside. I mean,
but
all
we will have to say it's very helpful if an artist has a good partner. So we've seen that where the team makes a very powerful combination, because by definition, you're talking about a creative mind, a mind that, in many aspects is not related to the real world. And we've seen some of the best partnerships where the other individual, whether it's the other counterparty,
Sure.
And that team becomes a very powerful force there. But go ahead with your example. I know exactly what you're going to say. The one thing that'll make us not buy your work.
Okay.
You know the one I'm talking about, the festival. Yeah. So the only, I mean, I think we've never been like this close to buying a piece and then, you know, just we may not get the price we want and then not get it, but that's up to whoever's selling it to us.
Sure.
But I did have a situation at an art, I'll call it an event, where I was very interested in a painting and I had seen it before the event, I think. And
we would have bought it.
And I was very interested in the piece of art. I tend to sit with things and make sure that I call it, they haunt me a little bit and then I have to go back. So I'd sat with it and it was not an inexpensive piece. And there was one hanging on the wall, and then this artist, a person that worked with this artist, went walking by with what looked to me like the exact same painting.
Oh.
So similar that it ruined it for me. I didn't.
Isn't that interesting? That's weird, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And so I don't know if there's some unwritten rule about that, but it certainly, I didn't want something that artist was churning out. And so that made me wonder how many more of that exact painting there were out there. And so it killed it for me. I don't own that painting.
Okay. No, that's fascinating.
Clearly the artist, you know, is the creator, and there's a business aspect, right? So you'll hear artists say, look, that works for me, I'm going to do it. It's a dangerous territory. If you're doing something that, you know, looks quite similar to, you know, you're paying a price for an original piece of art, not a print. And if it starts to look like a print, then you're pretty, as a collector, you're not too happy.
Right. Well, I absolutely agree. And I think that was a really dumb decision on the part of the artist and his or her representatives. I will point out that the Clark Hulings Foundation is so focused on helping artists develop business skills that will put them in better position to succeed. And that is something that you can learn all about on the foundation's website. That was something terribly important to Clark, who recognized among his peers that, you know, there were some people kind of twisting in the wind when it came to their success for no fault of their own. And certainly Elizabeth and Penelope and their colleagues have really done a great job of helping to train with, you know, basic skills that are really essential to anyone who's running a business of any kind, including online work. Let me just ask then about, several times the name C.W. Mundy has come up, and I should point out that in the slide deck, there was an image by Stephanie Page Thompson, also of Indiana, who had studied with C.W. and has become a great artist of her own standing. Is there anything to say about role modeling for artists that obviously, you know, people are people and they just shine or don't shine, but that idea of finding mentors, people to learn from. We want to put ourselves in the way of luck. Obviously, we have talked about clubs and festivals and museums and other places like the foundation that we're celebrating tonight, where people can converge. But what is it about someone like CW that makes it all kind of click?
Oh, yeah, well, it starts off being a great artist, right? And, you know, he probably won't be able to get up the chair off his chair. His head's going to be so big. But, you know, CW he's a tremendous artist. He's a versatile artist. There's almost nothing he can't do well, right? And so, but what he does is it's the entire package, right? Now, you know, and even CW, who's probably, you know, he's not a spring chicken, as he said, he tries to make a good effort on social media, right? But that's probably not his market. And but I think it's just the way he presents himself. It's the quality of his art, the way he packages the art, who represents him. You know, it's all a very quality sort of image. Now, that's probably easier for him to do because he's well established and known, right? Like a new person. I would say your point about mentorship, Peter, is really critical. Aligning yourself with somebody who's been through it, done it before is critical, because one, you want to speak with your own voice and have your own style, right? So that's critical because nobody wants a copy. But learning from, and I think this is in every walk of life, right? I mean, whenever I try to do something, I'm like, who did it better than I did? Let me just imitate, copy, understand, and then make your own derivative. So I think your point of mentorship is critical. And you know, there are people like CW who do a tremendous amount of work guiding and educating young people. And frankly, I know Stephanie because of CW, right? And we've bought her pieces because of, I looked at it, I'm like, wow, really talented. Tad Retz, who I think is brilliant, again, through that relationship. Good. Because he has that, you know, if he's recommending it, that's a good housekeeping seal of approval, right? And then two, you know, they're just and, you know, for people to align themselves up with, you know, there are other artists of CW's, you know, stature. If you can get them, and you know, he's a very kind and caring individual. A lot of people may not be, they may not want to waste their time because what's in it for them, basically. But if you can find that individual, it's very powerful.
Here, absolutely.
CW has been very generous that way. I mean, we introduced him to artists at Plein Art Easton one year that he still keeps in touch with. One, you know, some of those ones that I saw them at their first Plein Art Easton and bought their first Plein Art Easton painting, and you know, feel very vested in their growth now outside of Plein Art Easton. But I know CW, you know, Charles Newman, for example,
tremendous artist,
so much, and CW has helped mentor him a little.
I like this is a CW show. Let's move on.
Oh my goodness, he will not be able to move. So let's turn over to our audience for questions, please. We seem to have lots of chats flowing in. Penelope has offered to help by reading some of the questions to us.
All right, here we go. So our first question is, how do you deal with issues of wall space and what will take precedence for presenting? To what extent do you try and have a dialogue between pieces within the collection? So I think you touched on that just after that question came in, but if you want to elaborate a little more.
Sooner or later, every collector is going to run out of space, right? That's just a matter of time. And so that's why we've designed our system where we can interchange pieces, and we will put some pieces away, bring out old pieces to, again, reappreciate them. So that's very helpful. We do play a little bit with themes, and, you know, sometimes Jill doesn't see my theme, but that's just because she doesn't get it. But, you know, we have some fun doing it. And, you know, we'd either group them by subject matter or artist or theme or something like that, just to make them visually interesting. But I've also come to understand that consistency in framing style is really quite important, because if you've got a bunch of hodgepodge pieces, it doesn't visually appeal. So you're limited somewhat because we're not going to be reframing pieces there. So I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
No,
that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Norwood, who is an artist who works with us, would like to know, are art fairs on your radar? And if so, which are your go-tos?
I mean, I don't know what an art is. Is Plein Art Easton an art fair?
Well, not really. I mean, the classic art fair would be something like Miami Basel or Frieze, New York, where dealers have set up booths. And it's not so much about artists speaking for themselves, it's about galleries speaking for the artists. That's the conventional art fair.
Those have been on our radar for the last few years, and I think COVID has kind of kept us from going there. I think we tend to not buy through dealers. We just kind of haven't in the past. You know, like I visited some dealers in London when we were there just right before COVID, and multiple paintings in this particular dealer. He loved many of the works there, and multiple of the paintings I remember what they sold for, and I remembered that they sold an auction, so I looked them up, and so thus that just confirmed why we don't buy from dealers.
Exactly.
Because they were 3 times the price what they sold for auction.
That's what they're doing. Yeah, that's right. Okay.
So, but I love the idea to go and look. Yeah.
Well, it's a way to educate the eye without having to make a purchase. Absolutely. That you could look around and just say, oh, I like that artist. I'll go and learn more later. That seems fair.
And I will say, you know, I think that if we were hunting something specific,
Mhm.
we would go to a dealer who's specializes in that at this point in our journey. And we understand that if you're not buying on spec and if they have ways of helping you find it, that you can come up with a way to make it financially feasible. So I'm not wanting to say that we would just never go that route. We just
Right.
don't and haven't much yet. But we've
Sure.
contemplated it because there is a specific artist that I'd like to have a piece from someday that I probably would need to go do that.
And I see Scott saying, "Be nice to us dealers." I think we definitely we don't have
Love you, Scott.
we don't have any issue. We just need to establish that trust, right? Because for me, the lack of transparency on the pricing is what matters. Because now you're not talking about inconsequential sums, right? So, you know, if I could have a relationship with a dealer and say, "Look, I'm going to make X dollars or X percent on this piece," we could have a very open discussion and come up with a understanding, because I respect, you know, that's how people make a living. That's how people run businesses. If we had that transparency, I would be happy. But when you walk into a very reputable London gallery and they're charging you 3 times what I could have bought 2 weeks, it's normally 2 years earlier, not 2 weeks, because they wait. And then they put it on for a crazy price.
But this one wasn't even 2 years ago. But I don't want to put the kibosh on it. We just haven't done that much for whatever reason. Or maybe we just haven't been looking for the right thing or had the right relationship.
Yeah.
And we should point out, of course, that historical art has that aspect to it very often. With contemporary primary market, there may not be a pattern of auction prices that one can track because the work is so new. So we have to distinguish between your various interests here.
Exactly.
Kirsten added that art fairs can also be things like Artscape in Baltimore, which is almost entirely individual artists, which is absolutely true. So those are a different breed of art fair, very worthy. Yeah. Penelope, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No problem. This is another thought from Kirsten while we were talking about Kirsten. This is sort of about how an artist talks about themselves in a situation like an art fair. Is it of interest to you whether the artist is full-time doing what they do?
Doesn't matter to me.
We have one artist that we collect that has a full-time job doing something completely unrelated to art, and we've been very happy to have him in our collection over and over and over again. So I think
Nice.
both works.
Great. Thank you for that. Do you look at a potential purchase with a black light to see cracks or any similar deficiencies? Have you had to restore any of the works that you've bought?
Yeah, this is a super critical issue about the quality of a piece, right? And again, something we've learned over time. But yeah, we won't buy any painting today without getting a full set of UV pictures, and frankly, focusing on the back of the frame, the back of the image as well. That's super critical with issues of quality. You can see if it's been lined. You can see provenance typically by the different stamps / stickers. And if it's a substantial piece, we've taken our conservator to New York with us and said, "Hey, this is," but you know, that we're spending for us real money. And you know, what do you think?
Right.
Right. That makes
And
sense.
as a collector too, I wouldn't be, you know, I don't consider myself an expert. You know, we take our conservator for a piece, but she has taught me what to look for. So I wouldn't be embarrassed to ask someone to take it in the dark room and shine a light on it and
Sure.
take a look at what you see. And
Good.
and most reputable folks representing a piece of art will help you interpret what you see.
Yeah, that's helpful.
right.
Mhm.
So our next question is, do you use any particular type of software to keep track of your inventory and purchases?
No, but we want to. And Peter's given me the name of a place to do that. I need to get it again because we need to. We need to be better about that.
Yeah.
We've got a 3-inch stack of papers, invoices.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Look out. That's a lot.
Yeah, that's great. That's a really good question. How do you resolve issues when you are up against other collectors who are interested in the same artist or artists that you are? I assume it's not a fist fight.
Well, we double team them and bring our teenagers.
Yes.
We don't, yeah, we don't get into that. That
You know, the auction price, the auction system, you know, it's the one who wants it most, right? You know, if I don't know, you know, we've become friends with collectors, right? And like when we go to Plein, Easton, as you guys know, it's like first, you know, the first one to get it.
Mhm.
You know, today, if one of our friend collectors wanted a piece that we wanted, good chance we would say you can have it. But if it was a special piece, we'd push, Jill would bend over behind them and I'd push them back. So
That's
I mean,
good.
we have
Teamwork.
we have some really fun times and healthy competition at some of these events for, you know, getting some of these pieces. And I will say, you know, there are some organizations like the OPA has some special, you know, one of the things with the collectors circle there is that there are some special, you know, first dibs events, first look before. And so we'll a lot of times participate in those things so that we can, you know, get into the members preview and that sort of thing if we think that there's something, an artist or something that we might be super interested in and have some competition there.
Yeah. So one, if I may jump in, Penelope, there was a question that is very related to what was just said. Has to do with if you like to normally sit with a work of art and think about it, maybe an hour, a day, how does it work with these more competitive venues? Is that something you just have to wear a different hat? You just have to say, you know what, I've got this feeling about this work. I'm going for it right now.
So I'm not good at that. So yin, yang, he's good at that. So he will be the more decisive one in that situation. And every once in a while, though, I actually see a piece of art that I know right that second that I have to have it. And that's rare for me. So I do know I have to have it. And so, but that he comes to that place much easier and quicker than I do. So yeah, I'm not good at that. It's stressful for me, these plein air things where the red dots are going around fast.
Right.
Yeah.
And for me, it's very, I can tell in
Penelope?
In 4 seconds if I like a piece. It's just that easy for me. Yeah, you know, it's good. It's like, I like it, it resonates. I don't have to study it. It's just very simple.
Yeah.
Now, Tim Newton would probably tell me that I'm being silly and advise me to, and you know, he's taught me to look for certain things and quality, and you know, have we made mistakes? Sure, right? And so we learn from that. But that's
yes,
really good.
Of course. Well, that's part of the journey. Absolutely, that's true in anything. Yeah.
Great. I think we can take just a couple more. So the next one I have is, when you buy in the UK, have you been asked to be vetted due to the AML5 KYC anti-money laundering laws?
Not yet. I know this is a big issue. It's probably a good way of laundering money. We don't actually have any needs to launder money, so we're quite comfortable with the legitimacy of our funds. Yeah, you know, we've bought stuff again through reputable auction houses who we've had a long relationship with. I do know the KYC laws are becoming they're much more important today than they were a few years ago, but not yet. You know, could it be an issue? I'm sure it could, yeah.
Yeah.
We've had to wait for the French rule.
Yeah, our Friand had to get clearance from the French government to leave the country. So we had to wait 6 months before it got its passport to travel. So that made it view. And it's interesting. I don't know if you guys know this, but in the French auction system, a national institution has the right to match your last bid and take the piece, right? So you are often wondering, you know, you're the high bid and then you realize you didn't get it. So that sort of pisses you off.
Yeah, that's very French.
Yeah. Happy Bastille Day, everyone.
That's right.
Exactly.
I think we're just about to wrap up the Q&A unless you see anything else, Peter, that you need to grab.
No, you did a great job. Thank you, Penelope. That's very helpful because there's so much flowing here. It's good to have another pair of eyes. Well, we're right on time. I was able to get all of my questions in, which I'm excited about. I would say that, you know, just in terms of one final thought, looking to the super future here, we're talking, it's another moment offline about blockchain, about cryptocurrencies, about NFTs, digital. Can you just give me some thoughts on any of that and its value? I mean, it doesn't sound like you're really in that zone. You certainly don't have NFTs hanging around your house, but do you see some merit in some of these technologies?
Yeah, Peter, I think the blockchain technology is very valuable. If they can figure out a way to tie that to the physical, thing, to establish provenance and authenticity, that can be extremely powerful. Probably puts a lot of people out of work at the research houses, at these auction houses. But clearly though, when you buy a crow, you want to make sure you have a crow, right? And I think the saying is that, Crow painted 1,000 landscapes and 3,000 of them are in the US, right? And
exactly.
So you want, there's nothing worse than getting a fake, right? And so having that authenticity, and I think it'll come. I think they'll establish the technology. I think that provenance and that history, I would love to know the history of art pieces and who owned them and something about the prior collectors, right?
Yeah.
You know a little bit from the blurb from the catalog, but it's a private collector from New York. What does that mean?
Right, exactly. Who is that?
Yeah, so that would be fun if that type of information could follow a piece frankly, in eternity.
Well, and we may see that happen in the near future.
Yeah,
Absolutely. It's being developed quickly. Yeah.
Correct.
Good.
Yep.
Thank you for that. I just wanted to touch on 21st century techniques a bit before we sign off. I want to thank Gordon and Jill so much for your time, for your energy, congratulate you on all you're doing in the way of collecting and inspiring others, not only through this evening, but also through Oil Painters of America, through your support of Plein Easton, and all sorts of other things that I probably don't even know about. I also want to thank everyone here on the call. Great to see you, or see your name at least. Glad you're with us. And of course, I want to thank everyone at CHF for putting this together, especially Shirley Holland. It's always a treat to gather with kindred spirits, as I said before. I can hand over to Penelope or Elizabeth for the last words.
Thank you so much, Peter. I'm just going to spotlight Elizabeth and I for just a quick moment. Sorry, Elizabeth, I'm coming to you. Coming to you now. Yes, so Elizabeth and I are so happy to have had you here with us today. Artists, I hope you'll join us next week for Brown Bag Lunch, Artist Peer Networking on Friday. I'm going to just throw that link into the chat. It's free. And we would just love to see you there to discuss these issues even more. And I would love to invite Elizabeth to tell us why we should put November 20th, 2022 in our calendars.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. You guys have given me a lot of ideas, and I'm going to be coming to you, Jill, because I want to figure out how to put the artists and the collectors together more, right? It's hard to figure out how to do that when it's in a non-competitive, not necessarily a buying of something situation. So be ready, and thank you for everything that you all have said this evening. November 20th, 2022 would have been my father's 100th birthday.
Wow.
So we're throwing a party.
Cool.
Throwing a party, we're launching a virtual reality exhibition, and we're trying to publish a book written by Jim Balistrieri. The event will be in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and probably also virtual. So get ready, because we're going to come out very soon, like next week, with a save the date. And I think it's going to be a smash. So, yeah. So I hope to see some of you there.
We'll be
Super
there.
exciting.
Love Santa Fe.
Yeah.
Love your time.
Yeah.
Good.
Well, thank you all for being with us today. If you need to get a hold of us at the Clark Hulings Fund, please do email us info@clarkhulingsfoundation.org. And Jill and Gordon and Peter, we can't thank you enough. Thanks for being with us tonight.
It's been a
Thank
pleasure.
you. It's been a real
Thank
treat.
you all.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thanks very much. Okay. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
See you later.